Close your eyes and picture your childhood bedroom. You can see the door, you know which floorboard creaked. You remember exactly how far the window was from your bed, without measuring, without trying. Now, try to recall what you had for lunch 6 days ago. You probably can't. And that gap is stranger than it sounds. In 2000, a neuroscientist named Eleanor Maguire scanned the brains of London taxi drivers, men and women who had spent an average of 3 to 4 years memorizing 25,000 streets and 320 routes through central London. A test called simply the knowledge. Their hippocampi, the brain's memory hub, were physically larger than the average adults. Not metaphorically, measurably, in cubic centimeters, on an MRI. Your brain did not evolve to store facts. It evolved to store places. That single distinction rewires how you should think about memory itself, not as a filing cabinet, but as a map. And nowhere is that more visible than in a system of memory so old, so vast, that Western science spent over a century dismissing it as myth. In Australia, some Aboriginal communities have maintained oral records, songlines, for what some researchers estimate may span over 10,000 years. A songline is a sung route across the landscape. Every verse corresponds to a landmark, a rock formation, a water hole, a bend in a dry riverbed. Walk the song, in order, and you walk the terrain, sometimes for distances exceeding 1,000 kilometers. In 2015, a science historian named Lynn Kelly published research proposing that these song cycles function as memory systems of staggering precision, encoding navigation routes, seasonal food sources, water locations, and law, all without a single written word. Kelly compared their internal logic to the memory palace technique used by ancient Greek orators. But the songlines are older, far older, and they weren't built to impress an audience. They were built because getting lost meant dying of thirst. Here's where it gets stranger. In 1966, a psychologist named Ralph Norman Haber ran an experiment at the University of Rochester. He showed participants 2,560 photographs, one at a time, for a few seconds each. Days later, he tested their recognition. Accuracy held around 90%. 90% across thousands of images, most of them ordinary and unremarkable. Haber concluded that human visual memory for places and scenes was nearly limitless in capacity, even when memory for words and numbers was not. That finding sat quietly in journals for decades, but it explains something the songline keepers seemed to already know. Your brain isn't bad at memory. It's bad at memory divorced from space. This is why a method called the Method of Loci, say, literally method of places in Latin, has survived since at least 55 BC, when the Roman orator Cicero described it in his text De Oratore. Cicero credited the technique to a Greek poet named Simonides of Chios, who, according to legend, survived the collapse of a banquet hall in Thessaly around 500 BC. The building crushed the other guests beyond recognition. Simonides alone could identify the bodies, because he remembered exactly where each guest had been sitting. Location became identification. Space became memory. Modern memory champions still use this exact 2,500-year-old method. In 2015, a study published in the journal Neuron scanned the brains of competitors in the World Memory Championships. Using the method of loci, these individuals memorized sequences of over 500 digits, or the order of a full shuffled card deck, in under 2 minutes. The brain scans showed something specific. Activation not in language regions, but in the same hippocampal and posterior parietal networks used for spatial navigation, the same regions enlarged in London's taxi drivers. But here's where the story stops being about technique and starts being about survival. Because for early humans on the African savanna, remembering the wrong location wasn't an inconvenience. It was the difference between finding a water source in a drought and not surviving the season. A 2011 analysis of hunter-gatherer movement patterns, including work among the Hadza of Tanzania, found that individuals routinely tracked resource locations across foraging territories exceeding 1,000 square kilometers, held entirely in memory, refreshed, and passed down through direct experience and storytelling, with no maps, no writing, no external record at all. Evolution had a choice to make: build a brain that remembers everything, or build a brain that remembers what matters. And what mattered for roughly 300,000 years of Homo sapiens history was where. That's not the whole story, though. Because something happened to this ability. Something recent. Something that may be happening to you right now. In 2006, a study published by researchers examining London's taxi drivers again, this time comparing them to London bus drivers. Bus drivers follow the same fixed route, day after day, for years. Taxi drivers navigate fresh, unpredictable routes constantly, building new spatial solutions on demand. The result? Taxi drivers showed significantly greater hippocampal gray matter than bus drivers, despite both groups spending comparable time behind the wheel in the same city for similar durations. The difference wasn't exposure, it was active spatial construction, the brain being forced again and again to build its own map instead of following someone else's. Then, in 2008, a study conducted at McGill University, led by cognitive neuroscientist Veronique Bobo, examined a new variable entirely: GPS use. Participants who relied on turn-by-turn navigation systems showed measurably reduced activity in the hippocampus during spatial tasks, compared with those who navigated using landmark-based memory. Bobot's later research, tracking participants over several years, found that habitual GPS users showed a steeper decline in hippocampal gray matter volume over time, a pattern she noted overlapped with regions affected early in Alzheimer's disease. You are, on average, holding a device in your pocket right now that has quietly taken over a function your species spent hundreds of thousands of years perfecting. The songline keepers of Australia never needed a satellite. Simonides never needed a notebook. The taxi drivers of London had to grow new brain tissue to hold their city, verse by verse, street by street, because nothing else would hold it for them. You still carry that same ancient architecture, the same hippocampus that once mapped 1,000 kilometers of desert, or the exact seating chart of a banquet hall the moment before it collapsed. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just waiting for you to stop asking it to.